We lived on a steep hill, sort of a steep hill, so a bicycle was something I never had until I went to Oberlin, because everybody rode bikes there. So I got a secondhand bike when I went there, but I never had that at home, and I wasn't much of a athlete. My brother was. He played football in high school and then in college, but I never was, although I loved to swim, and we had a good community park in Mount Lebanon with a wonderful swimming pool. So we did do that a lot. Our whole family would go there. After my dad would get home from work, we'd go to swim before dinner. I had several good friends that we spent a lot of time together. I remember my mother sent me to elocution classes. That's something nobody's heard of these days, but that was something that girls did then. And I that was fun. I liked that. I loved to read. My mother loved to read, and I loved to read, and I just read all the time, and I can still remember her hollering up the stairs, "Are you cleaning your room, or are you in that book again?" But she was in a book a lot of the time too, although she cleaned the room first. She was a very fussy housekeeper. I can remember when I was still 5, almost 6. I came home from kindergarten one afternoon, and my mother was hanging clothes out in the yard. It's so funny that I still remember seeing her hanging up clothes, and she said, "We're going to California tonight." And I, of course, was shocked and surprised, but my grandmother, my father's mother, was very sick, and I guess they called my dad and said, "You need to come." So we were all going, including his sister who lived in Pittsburgh and her son. So we got on the train that night, and it probably took us 3 or 4 days to get to California. And I can still remember stopping at those Harvey restaurants for our meals. And one of the times that we had stopped for a meal, we were getting back on the train, and my brother was nowhere to be found. And I can still hear my aunt saying, "Don't you start this train till we find that boy." She was all upset, but here he'd gotten on and walked the wrong way, so he was on the train. That was fun. Now, that was a big experience for us because we'd never been on a train before, I don't think. So we stayed in California that year for a couple months at least, because I remember that the day we came home was my 6th birthday, and I can remember my aunt saying, "Don't tell them it's your birthday," because I guess I was riding on a half-price ticket or something, because I was under 6. I think that was it. But I can still remember her saying, "Don't tell them it's your birthday." But we got home on my birthday. Remember my other grandma had a birthday party for me when we got home. As I've grown older, I appreciate more and more my parents. And I remember reading that John Rosemont, who writes in our paper every week, who is a child psychologist, saying that the best thing a father can do for his children is to love their mother. And I always felt that that was the way it was in our family. My father and mother cared for each other, and they cared for us, and we had a very stable life growing up, which I appreciate more all the time, especially now when so many children don't have a stable family. And then my grandmother was a big part of our lives, my mother's brothers, and she had a half-sister, the one who was born from my grandmother's second marriage, and they were very close always, and they were close to us all the time. So we were lucky to have a caring family, not just our parents, but an extended family too. My father was Catholic. He didn't go to church, but he took us, my mother and my brother and me, he took us every Sunday, drove downtown to First Presbyterian Church, and drove around town or did whatever, just waited to pick us up again, because my mother never did drive. So the church was very important in my life growing up. And when I graduated from high school, our preacher, who was a well-known Presbyterian, very a leader in the Presbyterian Church. He even came to my graduation, which was really something that I thought was quite unusual and quite different. So that was a big influence in my life. I was really pleased with the kind of teachers that I had. I think I had really good teachers, so that when I went away to school, I felt like I had really been well prepared for it. My husband also went to Oberlin. That's where we met. But he didn't have, I don't think he had nearly the training that I had had. And yet he went to what was considered a very good school in Youngstown, too. And I know he had some good teachers, too, but we had to write papers all the time at Oberlin. He had never had to write a paper in high school, which I couldn't believe that. So as I say, I think I was fortunate. The year that I graduated from high school, I worked as a counselor at our church camp. So when I went to Oberlin, the women's lived in dorms with dining halls, and the men students came to the women's dorms to eat. So it was a good way to do. We sat at round tables. We had to wear dresses for dinner, and the men had to wear coat and tie to dinner, if you could believe that. And my future husband was somebody that I got to know that first week even, and he had been at camp for the summer, had been for several summers at the YMCA camp from Youngstown. So we talked about camp. I remember that first week practically. We talked about having been to camp. That was a very important part of his growing up, was going to camp. I hadn't done it for more than a couple of years, but he'd been going to camp every summer for probably 5 or 6 years and working the last few summers. He was a real YMCA boy, a straight arrow, as everybody said.